on the line with us is Daniel Flynn, 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 files.com, his website, his new book, Blue Collar Intellectuals, When the Enlightened and the Everyman Elevated America. He's the author of previous books, A Conservative History of the American Left and Intellectual Morons. Daniel J. Flynn, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. It seems... You know, I remember sitting with my dad as a kid watching William F. Buckley's Firing Line, which was a pretty intellectual show. And, you know, my dad was a pretty blue-collar guy who worked in a tool and die shop. And it was very popular all across America. And you go back and you read Alexis de Tocqueville, 1836 to 38, and, you know, he was writing about how he would just walk up to farmers in the field and they knew more about European politics than he did. And he was a French intellectual, you know, 36-year-old young French aristocrat. What are we have a long history in this country of working people who actually know what the hell's going on. Are you suggesting that they have vanished?
Well, I don't know about vanished, but you know, the book is really about a time when smart looked for you. And I think the difference with today is you can find smart if you look hard enough for it. But 50, 60, 70 years ago, smart looked for you with the Book of the Month Club, with the GI Bill, with the advent of paperback literature, which basically made buying books affordable to all people, with the Carnegie libraries. All sorts of things were going on in the 20th century to make America the best educated people in the history of the world. And I think if you look around today, there's not a whole lot of evidence that would suggest that we're the best educated people in the world, let alone in the history of it.
Well, the GI Bill, I mean, when the GIs returned from World War II, the United States was at the peak of arguably, probably the numbers were higher back during the Revolutionary era. But, you know, throughout the 19th and 20th century, we were at the peak of higher education with, as I recall, around 6 or 7% of the populace having a college degree. And, you know, within 6 or 8 years of the end of World War II, that number had gone up to nearly 20%, if my recollection is correct, 16, 18%, because of the GI Bill, because the federal government said we're going to invest not only in our physical infrastructure, but in our intellectual infrastructure. And in the process of doing that, Truman and Eisenhower, with those massive investments, took us from a debt of 125% of GDP, which is much, much worse than the debt we have right now. Because they got so many people so smart and they put so many people to work, and created this infrastructure for America. They paid off the debt by growing the economy. Why don't people get that today? And why are I get it that a lot of Democrats are pushing for that, although there are some who aren't. But the Republicans are standing in absolute opposition to anything that would rebuild our intellectual infrastructure. Why?
Well, I think one of the problems is that college has become the new high school. The idea of sending millions more people into college, when in fact when you have 14, 15 million people or whatever the number is a year that are attending higher education, it would be great if they could be brought up to the level of higher education. But instead, what's happened is higher education has come down a level. One of the blue collar intellectuals that I write about, a guy named Ray Bradbury, who your listeners probably know is a science fiction writer. When he was a kid, he had not a lot going for him. He was a nerd's nerd, and he was so poor that he was sleeping in his parents' pull-out couch with his brother well into adulthood. The one thing he had going for him was he was super smart, and when it came time to go to college, he realized he couldn't go. He didn't have the money. So what he did was he went to the public library for 3 days a week, did this for 4 years, and he read, and he read, and he read. To me, a guy like Bradbury had it right. In other words, he could care less about that piece of paper that comes at the end of the 4 years. All he cared about was the education. I think we have it, as Lincoln would say, bass-ackwards today. All we care about is that diploma, is that piece of paper after 4 years. And the education that comes with it, that's just kind of a perfunctory requirement. And I think that's one of the things that has gone wrong with higher education, is that it's almost like this University of Phoenix model where people are sort of pushed into it and through a diploma mill, and there's the expectation: if you give them the money, you get the diploma.
Well, what we're looking at right now is the private for-profit college industry is exploding in the United States, and it's where over 70% of your student loan defaults are happening. These people are graduating from these for-profit colleges with useless educations. Lots of promises were made to them about finding jobs that are not fulfilled. You've got more lawsuits in that area, things like that. Why don't we I mean, when I went to college, and my wife, for that matter, she actually went farther than I did. She graduated. I mean, she put herself through college working as a waitress in a Howard Johnson's. That was in the late 60s. My mother worked her way through Michigan State University in the 40s as literally as a lifeguard in Charlevoix, Michigan in the summers. Both had no money whatsoever outside of that. And you could do that back then because we had the land grant. Michigan State was a land grant college that Abraham Lincoln helped establish to have basically free or very, very cheap education for all the people, just like Thomas Jefferson did with the University of Virginia. But ever since Reagan came into office and ended free college education in California and started and stopped federal aid and just encouraged individual colleges to start being run like businesses, we've seen the decimation of the land grant college system. It's getting more and more expensive to go to college. Right now, student credit card debt stands at $1 trillion. It's great. Student loan debt. It's greater than the national credit card debt, and this is something that we've never seen before in the history of our country. Isn't it time to say enough already with this experiment of laissez-faire capitalism in education and return education to the commons and say, we're going to invest in our intellectual infrastructure the way that we did in the 40s and 50s with the GI Bill?
There's more federal money going to college than in the history of the country. I don't know what.
Well, that's because there's more people than in the history of the country. You got 311 million people in the country right now. There was 200 million people in the country when my dad went to college.
There's, my wife's a college professor at a private institution. It's not even laissez-faire there. The kids are getting so much in federal aid and grants, and I wonder if we could just make the connection a little bit between if the federal government subsidizing the tuition and these colleges, private or public, they look at that subsidy as a license, as an invitation to raise tuition, and that's been the trend.
Well, why is that not happening? In virtually, there are 34 countries in the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD countries, the 34 richest nations in the world. We are the only one of those nations that doesn't provide free or almost free college to people who graduate from high school. Many of them, for example, Germany and Switzerland, require that you do a year of military service or some other kind of nonprofit service after graduating in high school in order to qualify for that free college. And I think that that's a great idea, that we should have basically a draft here after high school. But none of them are experiencing the kind of inflation that we are outside of their private college systems. So I don't buy your argument.
Well, we're also the destination point for people who want to go to college from around the world. So there is something to be said about the way higher education operates.
We're the destination point for some. There are many who are going to Oxford or Cambridge or the many good colleges in the UK. There's very good college. People are still going to very good colleges in Paris and in France and Switzerland. I mean, we're not that exceptional.
We certainly are. The fact that we have people from around the world coming to our colleges, it says something about it. But, really what my book is about, what Blue Collar Intellectuals is about, is that education is so important that you can't just leave it up to the colleges or the schools. It is, as one of my Blue Collar Intellectuals, Mortimer Adler, put it, it's a lifetime endeavor. And the reason why it's so important and why this argument transcends politics is because, what Adler said is basically, when you have a kingdom, it's easy. The education fit for a king. You just have to educate that one guy, and all's fine. But if you have a citizenry made up of 311 million people, you have to have that education that's fit for a king. That has to be everybody's education. And if you don't have that, you're going to have a citizenry that's not only not fit to govern the country, but not fit to govern themselves either.
I think we're saying the same thing. Probably our ways of achieving it would be different, but people can read about it over at Flynn Files, FLYNNfiles.com. The book is Blue Collar Intellectuals. Daniel Flynn, thanks for dropping by.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah, good talking with you.